Hello, it's as I'm recording this, it's the day after the night where the 2019 European election results were announced. I did a video recently about the impending departure of Theresa May from her role as Prime Minister and the shambles of Brexit, the uncompleted Brexit that she's overseeing. Someone who watched my previous video said that they were particularly interested in the section of the video when I talked about Lexit, which is the left-wing alternative to Brexit, and suggested that I did a video just talking a bit more about that. So here I go. My perspective, as I outlined in the previous video, I've been a member of the Labour Party throughout my adult life. For most of that time, I've been opposed to Britain's membership of the European Union. I see the European Union as very much a multinational capitalist organisation. It exists to support the capitalist economies of Europe, initially Western Europe. Freedom of movement of labour and capital is basically heavily weighted in favour of capital. So multinational companies can trade here, there and everywhere. They can move labour around, attracting the cheapest labour. Basically, as we all know from the Brexit referendum, all this stuff about take back control of our laws. European Union law overrides the domestic law of member states. And obviously, what's the Tory mantra? Take back control of our laws, our borders, and our money. Yes, so the great £350 million a week that will go to the NHS 3 years later, the Tories never actually meant to deliver that, and it's nowhere in sight. As for the immigration element, I personally have not got a problem with immigration. I believe that a sensible immigration policy can work. I personally, I think throughout our history, Britain's been influenced by immigrants, sometimes in the guise of conquerors. In more recent decades, immigrants from Commonwealth countries and European Union countries, which have made a great contribution to our economy and our culture. So what's the Lexit project, which is very much a small part, admittedly, of those who campaign for us to leave the European Union, says that Britain, with a Labour government, can run a independent socialist economic policy where we can rebuild the public services that were decimated initially by Thatcher and then by subsequent Conservative prime ministers. We can invest in our industries and our public services. We can have a democratic and legal process where we aren't subject to laws that are made up to basically compromises across 28 different countries. So, as I say, it's called Lexit. It's short for Left Exit. It is actually a socialist, pro-European, internationalist approach. I'm an internationalist. I want really good relationships between Britain and Europe. I'm not one of these ones like the Tories. We want to be in Europe because Europe can benefit us, not we want to be in Europe because it's a good thing. I do not feel that the European Union is a positive force for democracy or for international cooperation. For example, the dreadful way that they treated Greece a few years ago, imposing further austerity on a struggling economy. Their democratic credentials, I've got, sorry, to the point, Catalonia. I believe in self-determination of nations. The Catalan people voted in a referendum to secede from Spain. Basically, the Spanish government cracked down with a very heavy-handed police response, and the European Union said this was okay. Now, the SNP, I've actually got quite a lot of respect for the SNP and quite a lot of sympathy for the case for Scottish independence. I mean, their argument was during the independence referendum, vote for an independent Scotland, and then you won't have to be. Scotland will never again be ruled by a Tory government from England. I've got a lot of sympathy for that. I do actually think it would benefit Scotland. I do think having an independent Scotland with a progressive, either hopefully Labour, but if not SNP government, would actually benefit England, as having good neighbours like that and showing the way. But I just wonder why, and there are quite close links between the independence movements in Scotland and Catalonia. But why on earth the SNP put any faith that the European Union is on the side of small nations in this case? I just really cannot see the logic of that. Anyway, I've been watching quite a lot of the TV coverage today of the election results. You can't go 5 minutes without some media commentator talking about the great triumph of Nigel Farage, blah blah blah. That Farage, I try not to speak about him too much, but he really is a really nasty, cynical politician. He was a wealthy stockbroker. He was a Tory. Then he moved to UKIP. UKIP have never delivered anything. They've never had an MP elected to the parliament. Well, they had a couple of, sorry, I tell a lie. A couple of Tory MPs defected to UKIP and then were re-elected as UKIP MPs, but they didn't last very long under the UKIP banner. A large number of the UKIP MEPs elected in recent years to the European Parliament have basically, in various scandals, either financial or various other scandals, have basically left either the party or left the European Parliament. Even Farage got so sick of UKIP and their extremism that he left and formed his new Brexit party, which is under investigation from the Electoral Commission for possible irregularities about their fundraising. So, let's say UKIP, very little representation in Parliament. When they go to the European Parliament, Farage and his cronies have earned literally millions of pounds from being paid as members of the European Parliament, never actually achieve anything. They just go there and whinge. He still wants his pension, and it's just total cynicism. Very few local councils in Britain have been controlled by UKIP. The rare examples they have, they never delivered anything. I just don't know why people put faith in them. It's basically a single issue, UKIP / Brexit party, as they now become. Well, obviously UKIP's still going, but some of them are now the Brexit party. It really is cynicism. If you want actually to look at someone who is a figurehead, and probably I would say the most influential man or politician in Britain for actually delivering or making the case for Britain leaving, which was eventually got voted on in the 2016 European election, I would look at Tony Benn. Sadly, he died a couple of years before that referendum and didn't get to see his work come to fruition. But he was the man who argued that the decision on the Tories took us into Europe in 1973. He was the man, when Labour renegotiated the deal, said it should be the people's decision. We will have a referendum on the terms that we've renegotiated. So in 1975, there was a referendum. The improved terms were backed by the majority of those who voted, and we stayed in Europe. But Ben, he, as a government minister, one of his famous phrases was to the effect that socialism is illegal under the Treaty of Rome because of sorry, I'm hesitating here a minute because my computer screen's froze up. I think it's still working. He would just said both because of the Treaty of Rome and the economics of the EU, it wasn't a vehicle for socialism. He also said, as a British government minister, he's constantly frustrated because bureaucrats in Brussels were trying to override the democratic decisions of him, as he was representing the British Parliament and British government, the British people. So he was the man who, for decades, it seemed like he was in the wilderness with a small minority of people. So Brexit as a right-wing xenophobic, um, with tinges of it's nationalist, tinges of racism in the project. It's very much, let's hark back to the days of the empire, good old Britain. Britannia rules the waves. We've got a great um, power within the world out of proportion to our size. No, Britain's still one of the biggest economies in the world, but a lot of that is due to our historic strength, perhaps like maybe in the Victorian era. Our industry was decimated by Thatcher. May has, and Major, Cameron, May, other Tory prime ministers, they've not done anything to develop our society. So for all those people who say our politics is broken, our politics is fractured, our politics is this, that, and the other, and it is a very worrying situation. As I say, I voted to leave the European Union. I still, if there was a second referendum, I don't think there should be a second referendum. I do believe the argument that the choice was it would be put to referendum in 2016, and the government and parliament would honour the result of that referendum if people voted to leave. I do think a lot of the fault lies with Cameron, who actually specifically pledged that he would immediately invoke Article 50 upon a vote to leave the European Union. He should have done that. We should have left the European Union 2 years ago. Instead of that, we'd have 3 years of absolute shambles. You may notice that I do find this whole thing very stressful. I'm sure millions of people in Britain do, but I do find it also very frustrating the way in which the argument is put quite often in the media. It's well, I just wanted to say there is an alternative. There is a way of leaving the European Union and actually negotiating, as Labour's policy has been, that we will have close ties to the single market, we will have a customs arrangement with the European Union. I'm fine with that. I do want us to have close economic, cultural, friendship links with the rest of Europe. But in a Europe increasingly fractured and with right-wing nationalism on the rise, thankfully the much vaunted rise of the far right parties hasn't been as bad in these results as some people predicted. But I do feel, as a member of the Labour Party and as a British citizen, I do think we do need obviously something better than Theresa May's deal. We do need to renegotiate the deal, have a sensible deal, leave with a deal, and get on with it quickly, not hanging around. At the moment, we're going to have to hang around for 2 months while the Tories find themselves a new leader to replace the discredited May. But really, things should be done ahead of that. We really do need discussions across Parliament about coming up with a sensible deal. We do not want a hard Brexiteer Tory Prime Minister replacing May and basically trying to take Britain out of Europe without a deal in October or even earlier if they can achieve it. I don't think Parliament will stand for that. I don't actually think Boris Johnson is. Here's a bold prediction here. I cannot see Boris Johnson winning the Tory leadership, although he's a clear favourite with the media, because I just think there's enough. I always hesitate when I place any faith in the Conservative Party. I hope there are enough sensible Conservative MPs who realise that the Johnson no deal Brexit agenda isn't going to work, and when basically the Tory MPs whittle it down to 2 candidates, in which the great mass of the Conservative Party is about 100,000 of them, possibly less, 70,000 according to one estimate recently. Will be interesting to find out how many people vote in this election. I mean, Labour's got 550,000 members because of the politically engaged people in Britain. A lot more of them see that the Labour Party's got something to offer than the Tories. So I may have rambled a little bit off the original premise of this video. It's probably gone on for a bit longer than than I thought it was. But hopefully, just those thoughts on the European election and Brexit and the Lexit, the positive alternatives that the Labour Party and other groups who genuinely care about our society and our future relationship with Europe. Really, there is a positive agenda. There is a lot to fear in Brexit, but there's also an opportunity. So thank you for watching, and hope that's been of interest. Thank you. Good night.